It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to present this keynote and talk to you about the history of high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter. It's really been fun. Leslie asked me to give this presentation probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. And I'd never really thought about the history. And so I started digging into it, and it's been a really amazing and enjoyable journey. But I want to start out this evening with a disclaimer. Any discussion of history is really just a summary of people's involvement in critical events. Right? When you just think about it, that's what history is. It's what people have done at important times and doing important things. But the key term I want to use here is it's a summary. There's always a risk of omitting some people and some critical events. I'm absolutely sure that I have done that, and it's not been intentional. So if I have forgotten someone important, especially someone important in this room, just please forgive me because it wasn't intentional. In a veterinary surgery text from around 1900, stated this: on account of the difficulty of coping with the feline gymnastics provoked by the restraint and the operation itself, the castration of cats has never been a very popular operation. The danger of personal injury in the form of scratches and bites is not a triviality, especially in cats not accustomed to fondling. There are various methods of securing cats safely, but these afford no protection to the surgeon. The body may be wrapped in a blanket or a large towel or forced head down into a bootleg. Anesthesia is not indicated on account of the short duration of the operation. The discomfort of anesthesia exceeds the pain. So surgical sterilization of pets was introduced to the veterinary profession around 1900. It wasn't quite high volume, and it certainly wasn't high quality. Now fast forward to the 1970s. In the early 1970s, in response to encouragement from the public over the overpopulation of unwanted dogs and cats, the city of Los Angeles and Orange County, California, began the process of establishing high-volume spay-neuter clinics in local animal shelters. This created an outcry from the local veterinarians, claiming that the government was setting up clinics that would take business away from them. I'll bet none of you have ever heard that before, right? The veterinarians, in response, organized and created their own high-volume spay-neuter clinic in an emergency clinic facility. The emergency clinic functioned in the evenings, and the spay-neuter clinic was to function during the day. The logic was that if the veterinarians opened a high-volume, low-cost clinic, the government and the shelters wouldn't. Dr. Marvin Mackie, a 1963 graduate of Washington State University College of Veterinary Medicine, had been practicing as a relief veterinarian in Southern California for several years. And when the high-volume clinic opened, Dr. Mackie was hired to perform spays and neuters. Dr. Mackie was not aware of any other clinic specializing in high-volume, low-cost spay-neuter at the time. To the best of his knowledge, they were the absolute first. At that time, it was estimated that only 10% of dogs and 1% of cats, of pet cats in the United States, were sterilized, and the estimates of the numbers of animals euthanized in animal shelters was between 22 and 24 million each year. In 1972, a young, naive veterinary graduate who knew absolutely nothing about pet overpopulation. That was probably the wrong point to pause. Started an internship at the Henry Berg Memorial Hospital of the ASPCA in New York City, affectionately known as the A. In the early 70s, though, the ASPCA was animal control for all 5 boroughs of New York City. And in the year of my internship, the ASPCA euthanized over 130,000 stray dogs and cats in that 1 year. I did not realize at the time, but that number never left me and has formed and shaped the last 25 years of my career. In 1976, an 8th grade student by the name of Christine Wilford wrote an essay about how animal shelters were killing 22 million dogs and cats a year. Most likely, she didn't realize at the time that she would become one of the key players in bringing that number down. And in 1976 also, a 16-year-old girl by the name of Tracy Land began volunteering with her local Humane Society. She states that she was deeply touched by the plight of the homeless animals there. In 1977, a 12-year-old girl by the name of Brenda Griffin began to volunteer at her local veterinarian's office. That veterinarian worked with a local shelter and local spay neuter organizations. That began an adventure that would shape Brenda's career. She says while other kids were dropped off at the soccer field, she was dropped off at the SPCA meetings. The local shelter, though, was terrible. They spray painted the tops of the heads of dogs with a different color depending on the day of the week that they were admitted to the shelter. After a 7-day hold period, nearly all of the dogs that had not been claimed were euthanized in a gas chamber. Red-painted dogs on one day, blue the next, yellow the next, and on and on and on. Even at that young age, Dr. Griffin knew that it could be better, that it had to be better. The deplorable conditions in animal shelters and the tragic numbers of euthanized animals had placed a call. And pioneers and children who would become pioneers in high-quality, high-volume spay neuter were stepping forward. Dr. Mackie created a partnership with another veterinarian by the name of Dr. Phil Quita, I think is how you pronounce it. That partnership dissolved after 4 years, but it did not stop Dr. Mackie's progress. Each year for 6 consecutive years, Animal Birth Control, created by Dr. Mackie, opened another spay-neuter clinic in the Los Angeles area. Dr. Mackie states that animal birth control clinics' charges were 60% less than the average spay-neuter fees at full-service veterinary clinics. They would charge $25 to $45 per dog spay, depending on the size and age of the dog, and $17.50 for a cat spay. Dr. Mackie also states that veterinarians were so upset with the county and city's government's perceived interference with their business that they actually accepted what he was doing. In those early days, Dr. Mackie would average 20 surgeries a day, but as he became more efficient, that number grew to 25 and then 30 surgeries a day. It was 1980 when he first hit 40 surgeries a day, and by 1983 was averaging 75 a day. One day while performing an all-cat clinic, he sterilized 98 cats and sent people out to look for 2 more. They came back with 2 chihuahuas, which he sterilized, making his total for the day 100 animals. The 1980s saw more people join the movement. In 1986, Esther Meckler started Marion's Dream, a nonprofit foundation created in memory of her sister Marion, who had died in 1971 at the age of 25. And in the late 80s, a veterinary student at UC Davis Veterinary School, Julie Levy, and other students noticed feral cats all over the campus. So with the support of faculty and students, she started a trap-neuter return program. This began a long career for caring for and sterilizing feral cats. She comments, the need was so great, there were so many animals. In 1988, inspired by an article written by Dr. Leo Lieberman, Dr. Mackie began performing spays and castrations on dogs and cats as young as 8 weeks of age. Dr. Mackie says early age spay neuter is the biggest thing that's happened in the efforts to control pet overpopulation. And in the early 90s, the AVMA drafted a policy in support of pediatric spay neuter to reduce overpopulation of unwanted dogs and cats. Dr. Mackie began distributing his technique, which he called quick spay, and you can still watch his quick spay videos on YouTube, in the late 80s, and began training veterinarians in his techniques. One of the people he trained was now veterinarian Dr. Tracy Land. She opened Pet Vet in 1987 after receiving her DVM degree from the University of Georgia. Tracy was the first in Georgia to do pediatric spay neuter. Reaction from other veterinarians was, in her words, not good. Vets were skeptical at best, and many still are. She says some were downright hostile. Butcher was one of the more unflattering comments she recalls. In 1988, a company called Pet Food Warehouse began working with local humane groups to hold fundraising and pet adoption events. In 1989, Pet Food Warehouse became PetSmart and eventually would become PetSmart. In the 1990s, Dr. Mackie began distributing instructions on how to set up high-volume, low-cost clinics and began training veterinarians on his quick spay techniques at his clinics. One day in the 90s, Dr. Steve Ettinger, of Textbook of Veterinary Internal Medicine fame, came to Dr. Mackie's clinic, sat down, and watched him all day without saying a word. And at the end of the day, he approached Dr. Mackie and asked Dr. Mackie if he could send his interns to Dr. Mackie's clinic to be trained. Dr. Mackie trained his interns in spay-neuter surgery for the next 15 years. Now, some speculate that the advent of email and internet helped those involved in high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter connect with each other and learn from each other's work. Whether that's true or not is anybody's guess. But in the 90s, high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter began to really take off. But with increasing numbers of high-volume clinics and with more veterinarians performing pediatric spay-neuter, criticism from the veterinary profession increased. Veterinary Economics published an article on how to keep a Humane Society clinic out of your community, making such statements as, there's no such thing as 50% off safe or 50% off sterile. Marion's Dream started Spay USA in 1990 in response to seeing cats dying in the local shelter and on the streets of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Realizing that this was just a local manifestation of a larger national and international problem, Esther Meckler wanted to do something about it. Marion's Dream finds people with ideas and small programs that work to solve animal problems and helps them grow, gives them funds and helps them grow. Spay USA's mission is to help people find affordable, accessible spay-neuter for their pets and strays. Early on, Spay USA was officed in Esther Meckler's basement, and the phone rang constantly, she says. By 1993, 3 short years later, Spay USA had a network of veterinarians that would offer low-cost spay neuter in nearly 500 cities across the United States. The typical model was that the veterinarian would discount the surgery, the client would pay part of the cost, and a local humane society would pick up the rest. Reactions from veterinarians varied, some negative, some positive. Many veterinarians had already recognized that some clients could not afford the full cost of spaying a dog or cat. Esther's own veterinarian in Connecticut was one of the first to step up and offer a large discount for those people that Spay USA referred to him. He charged less per surgery, but did many more surgeries because of the client referrals. Throughout the country, Spay USA found vets like him that also understood this problem. Other veterinarians, of course, did not. In May of 1993, Susan Esterly published an article in Cat Fancy magazine providing the 1-800 number for Spay USA. That month, Spay USA had 23,000 calls for help. It was the last month that Esther Meckler tried to run the program by herself. I can't imagine why. Spay USA became a program of the North Shore Animal League, and over the years, Spay USA grew to become a national network of programs and clinics that refer people in need to more affordable spay-neuter clinics, programs, and private vets. Spay USA also organized and ran national and regional conferences facilitating networking of people committed to spay-neuter. Some networks have formed from these conferences, and Marion's Dream has provided startup funds to 29 different state programs. After graduation from veterinary school, Dr. Brenda Griffin now, the girl who went to Humane Society meetings rather than the soccer field, accepted a small animal internship at Angel Memorial in Boston and worked part-time in the Massachusetts ASPCA shelter. She overlapped very briefly with now Dr. Julie Levy, who was finishing up her internship when Brenda began hers. During their brief time together at Angel, Brenda was inspired by Julie's passion for saving cats, and believe it or not, Julie helped Brenda perform her very first cat spay. During Brenda's internship, some of the staff at Angel began doing studies on pediatric spay-neuter. The concept of spaying and neutering tiny puppies and kittens was still very novel at the time and intimidating to almost everyone, even those associated with the studies. Dr. Griffin looked on with great interest, saw firsthand how the little ones, the little puppies and kittens, came through the procedures and recovered from anesthesia. In 1995, Dr. Griffin was accepted into an internal medicine residency at Auburn University. During that residency, she assisted in teaching spay-neuter during her required surgery rotations. She took students to local shelters and brought shelter animals to the school for students to do spay and neuter. Residents were required to perform a research project, and when asked what she wanted to do, she said she wanted to solve the pet overpopulation problem. She found a mentor, got funding, and began to study non-surgical contraception in cats. After her residency, she accepted a research fellowship to continue her studies in non-surgical sterilization and started a shelter medicine program. Along the way, Brenda visited the animal shelter of the Greenville Humane Society to learn how to do pediatric spay-neuter. She was taught the techniques by Doctors Cindy Cox and Stuart Hovis. Brenda also founded and directed a campus at Auburn, trap-neuter return program, and held large-scale clinics staffed by veterinary students and other volunteers. In the early 90s, I started taking veterinary students to a local shelter in Mississippi to perform spay neuter on dogs and cats eligible for adoption. If you know anything about shelters in the Southeast, you would not be surprised that we had to limit our activities to one shelter, as it was the only shelter in a 100-mile radius of the school that had a surgical suite, if you could call it a surgical suite. It was actually very difficult to get information about what programs existed in other veterinary schools in the 90s, but it is realistic to say that most veterinary students from most veterinary schools graduated having performed only 1 or 2 spays if they were lucky, and no pediatric spays. In the early 90s, Bill McKelvey worked with the Macomb County Friends for Animals and was concerned about the numbers of animals being euthanized in animal shelters. There seems to be a consistent theme there. Bill's vision was that spay neuter would reduce euthanasia numbers. Not being aware of any high-volume spay neuter clinics at the time, Bill visited veterinarians in Greenville, South Carolina, who were performing spays for animal shelters to get ideas about how he could open a spay neuter clinic. On May 2nd, 1994, Humane Alliance opened its doors. Dr. Lisa McMillan, a private practitioner, was hired as the first spay neuter surgeon at Humane Alliance. On that first day, they did 6 surgeries, and they were ecstatic. Nancy Lyles was the first director of Humane Alliance, and Daniela Wells the first veterinary technician. Daniela still works with Humane Alliance today. Also in 1994, PetSmart Charities, now known as PetSmart Charities, formed as an independent nonprofit organization and partnered with PetSmart to help save the lives of homeless pets. PetSmart Charities would become the largest single funder of spay neuter and high-volume spay neuter clinics in the country. After leaving Angel Memorial, Dr. Julie Levy completed a residency and PhD program at North Carolina State. She continued her pet rescue activities, working with a group called Second Chance Pet Adoption. Out of this work, Operation Catnip was born in Raleigh, North Carolina in 1994. Right. Local veterinarians were very supportive. One vet let them use her clinic for surgery. Dr. Levy joined the faculty at the University of Florida College of Veterinary Medicine in 1997 and established Operation Catnip at U of F in 1998. Operation Catnip hosts free monthly spay-neuter clinics at the college, during which approximately 200 community cats are spayed, neutered, and vaccinated. The clinics are staffed by volunteers, including local veterinarians, veterinary students, and cat lovers. The clinics serve as an important surgical training program for veterinary students and is at no cost to the college. The first Operation Catnip spay-neuter event at U of F was on July 12, 1998, and they sterilized 80 community cats. Dr. Levy has a poster in her office signed by every volunteer that worked that day. When Operation Catnip was first announced at UFF, local veterinarians were anxious. Operation Catnip was very strict about only working on community cats, and that alleviated some of their concerns. In those early days, Julie says grant money was easier to obtain, and Operation Catnip had the funds to contract with 16 local practitioners to do surgeries in addition to the ones performed monthly at the school. Right? Operation Catnip would train the practitioners and give them traps. Over time, local veterinarians grew to be very supportive. Many vets still volunteer to do surgery. Some of the original practices that contracted with Operation Catnip continued to work in their own practices even after the funding dried up. Amy St. Arnaud knew that from an early age she wanted to work with animals, but she had this thing about blood and needles. So she explored other options. To find her role in the mid-90s, Amy began traveling, going to conferences, and meeting with people involved in spay neuter. In 1997, Amy met Esther Meckler and Becky Robinson of Alley Cat Allies fame. She spent weeks shadowing them and actually staying at their homes to learn everything she could about spay neuter and feral cats. She obtained Julie's Operation Catnip documents. She spent a week with SNAP in Houston, observing and learning. The very first spay she watched was with SNAP in Houston. And of course, she fainted. In the mid-90s, Dr. Christine Wilford, the once 8th grader who wrote that essay about pet overpopulation and the numbers of animals euthanized in shelters in the 70s, was now a veterinarian and remembers a very well-to-do client, a client who drove a BMW, wore fancy clothes, and always provided excellent veterinary care for her 3 cats, telling her about a pregnant cat that lived under her porch. When Christine recommended that she bring the cat in to be spayed, the client declined. It wasn't her cat. The light bulb went on for Christine. She recognized that decisions people make are not always about the money, but often about emotional involvement. If this lady agreed to bring the cat in to be spayed, then she would have an emotional commitment to continue to care for the cat. Becky Robinson and Alley Cat Allies were making information about feral cats, community cats, available, and that helped Christine get started. Christine was a member of the Seattle Animal Control Commission and took the issue of feral cats to one of their meetings. While the new director of the commission was sympathetic, he did not believe that the City Council of Seattle would have any interest in working on an animal-related issue. But Christine's interest was noted, and someone approached her saying they would fund a program to spay and neuter feral cats if Christine would be the surgeon. The Feral Cat Spay Neuter Project was born in 1997. Trap neuter return was not even legal in Seattle, and Christine thought it easier to get forgiveness than permission. So trap neuter return was started in Seattle. Christine recruited veterinary friends who would volunteer to perform the surgeries for the Feral Cat Spay Neuter Project. She refers to what they were doing at the time as high volume, but not necessarily high quality. The skill level of the surgeons varied. Some surgeries were through 5-inch incisions and took 1.5 to 2 hours to complete. These are cat spays. All right. Christine says she did her best to keep the program under the radar. Number one, it was illegal. But she was trying to avoid any negative reaction from the local veterinarians. And she really didn't get any negative reactions. She always limited the scope of services simply to spay neuter, and that helped minimize any pushback from practitioners. A second surgeon was added to Humane Alliance in 1996, and Karla Brestle joined Humane Alliance in 1998. With the addition of Karla, Humane Alliance increased its transport region and increased pre-adoption sterilization. Quita Mazzina had been on the board of Humane Alliance since its inception and was hired as interim director in 1999 and permanent director in 2000. With Quita's background in curricular development, the stage was set for a more comprehensive vision for Humane Alliance than just one small spay-neuter clinic. Karla describes Quita as the brains and Karla as the heart. And what an amazing, amazing team they've made. In 2003, Humane Alliance held a conference to explore how they could take the Humane Alliance model and duplicate it across the country. They expected 20 to 30 people to attend, but over 150 showed up. Represented at the conference were Best Friends, the ASPCA, HSUS, and numerous other humane organizations. Out of this effort, the National Spay Neuter Response Team was born, and the world of high-quality, high-volume spay neuter was changed forever. With the assistance of the National Spay Neuter Response Team, with Karla doing the training, the first duplicate shelter was opened in 2006. This was the Central Spay Neuter in Kernersville, North Carolina, near Winston-Salem. To date, 150 spay neuter clinics have been opened in a 10-year period. Only 3 of those clinics have closed. In 2015 alone, the clinics created with the assistance of the National Spay Neuter Response Team performed 1,057,998 surgeries. In the year 2000, Dr. Tracy Land conducted a survey of spay-neuter veterinarians regarding pediatric spay-neuter. 85 veterinarians at the time who had performed over 235,000 pediatric surgeries responded to her survey. They were unanimous that pediatric spays and castrations were easier and faster, less stressful on patients, less stressful on the surgeons, and had faster recovery times. Also in 2000, Dr. Brenda Griffin was invited by Esther Meckler to speak at the Spay USA meeting. Here she met other scientists working in the field of non-surgical contraception for cats and dogs and went on to co-found the Alliance for Contraception in Cats and Dogs with her mentor at Auburn, Dr. Henry Baker, and Dr. Stephen Boyle of Virginia Tech. She attended and spoke at many other Spay Neuter USA meetings over the following years, where she says she met some of the most incredible, inspirational, and forward-thinking people she had ever met. That included Karla Brestle, Quita Mazzina, Rick Descharme, Ruth Steinberger, Amy St. Arnaud, Carol Moulton, and others, on and on and on. All who shared her passion and understanding of the importance of spay neuter and who inspired her, she says, all the more. Dr. Griffin continued to teach students spay neuter, including pediatric spay neuter, and conducted wet labs for practitioners to learn pediatric spay neuter. Practitioners' reactions were mixed. They were excited that they could perform pediatric spay neuter and were opposed to spay neuter clinics. And as a result of her shelter program, listen to this carefully. As a result of her shelter program, regional shelters were beginning to improve, and shelter animals that were adopted were healthier. Believe it or not, that started generating complaints from private practitioners. Since shelter animals were healthier, that was taking business away from them. They weren't treating as many adopted shelter animals for various illnesses. Brenda says she recalls a meeting where she was called into the dean's office with a meeting with the dean and the practitioners where the practitioners outlined their complaints, and the dean turned to her and said, "What are you going to do about this?" I mean, what a strange world we live in, and what a sad commentary about some in the veterinary profession. Just when you think you've heard it all, you hear something different. Brenda says faculty reaction was becoming negative as well because students were openly admitting that they learned more about doing surgery on Dr. Griffin's shelter elective than on their required surgery rotation. And what did Dr. Griffin do about the problem created by those healthy animals taking business away from the local veterinarians? She left Auburn. Now, 2 things happened in 2003 that changed the course of Dr. Christine Wilford's feral spay neuter project. Christine spoke at about her program at a conference organized by Amy St. Arnaud and was asked by someone in the audience, "Do you really think you are accomplishing anything?" That caused Christine to think bigger. More needed to be done than what she was doing. By the fall of 2003, the Feral Cat Spay Neuter Project opened a stationary clinic. Initially, they restricted their services to feral cats, but a funder stepped forward offering to pay for all spay-neuter of cats and kittens at the region's largest cat rescue organization, with the stipulation that Feral Cat Spay Neuter Project perform the surgeries. That funding opened the door for other rescue groups to bring cats for surgery prior to adoption. While the program retained the name Feral Cat Spay Neuter Project, the mission now included feral cat prevention. It was no longer just performing surgeries on feral cats, but on any cat. All feral cats are the offspring of an owned cat, not sterilized, somewhere in the lineage. When Dr. Leslie Appel, who I assume some of you know, first got involved in spay neuter, she was on the faculty of the College of Veterinary Medicine at Cornell University. She would teach students sterilization techniques on animals from local shelters. Leslie volunteered for a rabies clinic for the Humane Society of Schuyler, is that right? County, and they vaccinated 274 animals in that clinic, 184 of which were intact. The need for spay neuter was so obvious. So on a trial basis, Leslie took veterinary students and other Cornell faculty to conduct a MASH-style spay-neuter clinic. In 1 week, they sterilized 222 animals, and Leslie never looked back. Initially, Leslie thought of doing her surgeries with a mobile unit, but the MASH-style operation was so effective, she stayed with that model. She was not aware of any other MASH-style spay-neuter operations in the country at that time. Leslie started shelter outreach services. Where am I? Went the wrong way. Leslie started shelter outreach services as a MASH-style, high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter program based out of Ithaca, New York in 2003. SOS travels from county to county and partners with local shelters, a lot of whom are in the room today, partners with local shelters and humane organizations to hold daily high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter clinics. They partner with 11 humane organizations serving over 10 counties in the Finger Lakes region of New York. When SOS started, they had a staff of 2 people working 5 days a week and sterilizing 5,000 animals per year. Today, SOS has grown to an organization that employs 24 employees, including 13 veterinarians, 9 licensed veterinary technicians, and 2 veterinary student employees. SOS is on the road 7 days a week. They are only off for major holidays, sterilizing over 10,500 animals per year. Since their inception, they have sterilized over 114,000 animals. SOS is primarily funded by fees for service. They partner with shelters and humane groups who raise funds writing grants to pay for SOS services. The humane partners also write grants, raise funds to supplement the costs for some of the low-income people who cannot afford to pay anything. The partners help when the low-income public can't pay anything. I think I just said that. SOS writes grants for big-ticket items that benefit the entire program, such as vans and autoclaves and other major equipment. At the onset, most local veterinarians were not supportive. But after 114,000 surgeries, no one has gone out of business. Most of the veterinarians now support their efforts, and many refer to them. SOS has mentored others, such as Dr. Sarah White, interested in establishing similar style MASH units. Through all her travels and employment opportunities, Amy St. Arnaud saw how a non-veterinarian could play a major role. She started Humane Ohio, a nonprofit spay-neuter organization, in 1999. She traveled the state of Ohio, bringing in speakers like Esther Meckler and Becky Robinson to teach people about the importance of spay-neuter. Initially, Humane Ohio's spay-neuter activities were through a MASH-style operation, and they did MASH clinics in Toledo, Columbus, and Cleveland. the MASH operation received lots of veterinary support. Veterinarians from 20 practices volunteered initially to do spay neuter initially in Toledo. In 2006, Humane Alliance became the Humane Ohio became the 6th stationary clinic mentored by Humane Alliance. With the opening of the stationary clinic, veterinary support disappeared. A few veterinary clinics still referred and partnered, but overall, local veterinarians feared that the clinic would take business away from them. Humane Ohio restricted their services to spay neuter and would try to refer clients to local practitioners for vaccines and routine cares, and the veterinarians would say, "We don't want those clients in our clinics." The ultimate paradox that so many in the spay neuter world have faced. Spay neuter clinics provide services to those that can't afford full service veterinary care, clients that many veterinarians don't even want in their clinics, while at the same time complaining that the spay neuter clinics are taking business away from them. Amy St. Arnaud was very disappointed in the veterinarians' reactions, and she tried to win them over by flooding them with information about Humane Ohio. This effort was met by no response from the local veterinarians. They would not even come to see her clinic. Quita Mazzina from Humane Alliance convinced Amy, "You simply have to do what's right." And that's what she's done. Leslie Appel started working for the ASPCA in 2004. She had just met Karla Brestle at a Best Friends conference the year before. According to Leslie, they completely clicked. And when Leslie joined the A, she was able to travel to Humane Alliance for a visit with Karla and Quita. During that trip, they talked about the need to pull together a group related to this emerging field of high-volume spay-neuter. The first National Spay-Neuter Task Force was born. Funded by PetSmart Charities and the ASPCA, and consisting of 22 veterinarians, the task force met under the superb leadership of Bert Troughton and Amy St. Arnaud. The first task force meeting was here at Cornell University, and for odd reasons, Leslie refused to attend. Right? Because she went into labor the day that the task force began. After 3 face-to-face meetings, dozens of conference calls, extensive literature reviews, and literally thousands of hours of effort, the task force developed the first medical care guidelines for spay-neuter programs, developed recruitment and retention documents, and started epidemiologic studies. The National Spay-Neuter Task Force was incorporated into the Association of Shelter Veterinarians in 2008 and was key to getting high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter established and recognized within shelter medicine and veterinary medicine. The words high quality were now inexorably linked with the concept of high volume. The Association of Shelter Veterinarians Medical Care Guidelines for Spay-Neuter Programs was published in the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association on July 1st, 2008, and high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter was changed again. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf states, and one positive that came out of all that devastation was increased funding for humane organizations and spay-neuter. Mississippi State's College of Veterinary Medicine was one of the beneficiaries of that increased funding, allowing us to obtain a mobile unit and to greatly expand our shelter spay-neuter program. We rapidly went from then 2 shelters to 14, and in 2013 obtained a second mobile unit. Every student in our college since 2007 has spent time on our mobile units performing spay-neuter and basic wellness care for dogs and cats. So where are we now? SOS, created by Leslie, continues to thrive, providing a much-needed service to animals in need. and the resulting SOS network of regional humane organizations has been a great help to the animals in the region. Most of you involved in this are in the audience today. Dr. Griffin moved on from Auburn to Cornell and now the University of Florida. She continues her interest in work in shelter medicine and spay neuter. She continues to influence veterinary students, interns, residents, and the profession on the importance of solving the pet overpopulation problem and on the importance of shelter medicine. Humane Alliance has grown steadily over the years and today employs 11 surgeons, averages 23,000 surgeries per year. Their transport program reaches 24 counties in western North Carolina, and they serve more than 45 humane organizations. Humane Alliance trains veterinary students, veterinarians, veterinary technicians, and veterinary assistants. They initiated veterinary CE in 2009, started their veterinary student externship program in 2010, their veterinary technician training program in 2013, and veterinary assistant training in 2016. To put their contributions in perspective, since 2010, Humane Alliance has had 856 veterinary students participate in their externship program. Students from 28 of the U.S. veterinary schools, every school in Canada, and 12 international students representing 9 different countries have received spay-neuter experience at Humane Alliance. As of this past Monday, the total number of surgeries performed at Humane Alliance since its inception in 1994 is 398,762. And the total number in their entire system, Humane Alliance and the National Spay Neuter Response Clinic, as of January 1st, they only compile these statistics once a year, is 6,167,255 surgeries. Humane Alliance now has become a program of the ASPCA, and with that, Amy St. Arnaud finds herself working once again for the A. Bill McKelvey's vision of reducing euthanasia through spay-neuter was spot on. Today in the Asheville area, shelter intake is down 56% from 1994, and euthanasia down 88%. While Esther Meckler retired from Spay USA in 2010, that doesn't appear to have slowed her down. She started Fix Felines by the Fix Felines by 5 campaign in 2013, the same year that the UC Davis study on the impact of spay-neuter in golden retrievers was published. Last year, she incorporated United Spay Alliance, and earlier this month hired an executive director with a goal of having state programs in all 50 states, not just 29. There's work yet to be done as she is still looking for state leaders to complete out the map. Esther says spay-neuter, and this is a quote, spay-neuter has become a specialty with some veterinarians learning techniques that allow them to do spays in a much quicker process with smaller incisions and quicker recoveries. Veterinarians who do spay-neuter the old way say it takes too much time to be worth it. In areas where the veterinarians still do the surgery the old way, prices outstrip ability or willingness of clients to pay the several $100s for the surgery, especially for cats who usually show up on the doorstep or are simply given to them by friends and family. With funding from PetSmart Charities, Operation Catnip created a website that details everything about the program for individuals willing to start a community cat program. They frequently mentor others and assist them in getting community cat programs, trap, neuter, return programs started. Operation Catnip's goal is to perform 200 surgeries during each event. This year, they will pass 50,000 surgeries performed. Locally in Gainesville, the euthanasia rate in cats was 80% when Operation Catnip began. Now the euthanasia rate is 16%. But the impact of Operation Catnip has been much more than just sterilizing cats. It has changed the mindset. The local shelter is now viewed very positively by the community, so much less drama about euthanasia, and that results in much more donor money. With successful community programs like Operation Catnip, communities begin to understand that there's a humane option for managing community cats. Operation Catnip has empowered communities to do something better. Dr. Levy states that there's a dramatic transformation in animal sheltering sweeping the country. Humane groups and animal shelters are being pushed to improve and to be more engaged and proactive with meeting residents where they are to deliver the most appropriate help. More research and mentorship is helping shelters adopt evidence-based tactics in place of outdated traditions. But threats to further progress remain. There's a need for highly capable executive leadership and, of course, a need for more funding. Dr. Mackie retired from active surgery in 2008 at the age of 72. During his last year, he performed 8,388 surgeries, averaging 45 a day for 5 days a week at the age of 72. He estimates that personally he performed over 250,000 spays and neuters, and that his clinics performed an additional 250,000. In 2010, PetSmart Charities, recognizing that most veterinarians were not trained or supportive of pediatric spay-neuter, and that most veterinary schools provided students limited experience in performing spays and neuters, PetSmart Charities created the Veterinary College Student Spay-Neuter Surgery Grant Program. The intent was to assist colleges of veterinary medicine in developing or expanding hands-on training programs in spay-neuter as long as they included pediatric spay-neuter. The first year of the grant program, only 2 colleges. Requests for proposals were sent to every college in the United States, and only 2 colleges even responded: University of Florida and Mississippi State University. Now, just 6 years later, more than 2/3 of the veterinary colleges in the U.S. are receiving funding from PetSmart Charities, and the majority of veterinary students graduating today are now being taught high-volume, high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter and pediatric surgery techniques. The Mississippi State Shelter Spay-Neuter Program now serves 24 shelters/humane groups, trains between 110 and 120 students per year in high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter techniques, and has performed over 60,000 surgeries since acquisition of that first mobile unit in 2007. 8 other veterinary schools have acquired mobile veterinary units, much like Mississippi State's, and are now taking students to shelters in rural areas to learn high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter techniques. Recognizing that nothing in medicine and surgery is static, the ASV knew that spay-neuter guidelines, the spay-neuter guidelines originally published in 2008, would need to be periodically updated. Accordingly, in 2014, the ASV reconvened a task force with the specific charge to update the guidelines. 20 veterinarians, again facilitated by Bert Troughton of the ASPCA and supported by PetSmart Charities and the ASPCA, worked for 2 years to revise the guidelines. These updated guidelines were just published 2 weeks ago in the July 15th AVMA Journal. I only have 82 more pages to go, so don't worry. Over the past 30 years, Dr. Tracy Land estimates that she has performed over 95,000 surgeries. While she admits she cannot take all the credit, her area has gone from having a high-kill, horrible county pound to having a beautiful shelter that no longer euthanizes for space. From euthanizing purebreds, puppies, and small dogs to one where all the purebreds, puppies, and small dogs are adopted, adult cats and pit bulls are now the bulk of the shelter's population, and even those are not euthanized for space. Given that, Tracy has recently sold her practice. She states that a lot of my goals were accomplished. The overpopulation problem in the area is significantly reduced. And she started a new practice. In a small town, rural, poor, uneducated population, and she says it's pretty much where she started 30 years ago in its animal welfare position. It's overrun with puppies, small dogs, and purebreds. She says the bottom line, I'm needed here. I like it here. I prefer the smaller clinic and staff. By the time Christine Wilford left as director of the Feral Cat Spay Neuter Project, they were doing 10,000 surgeries per year. Christine currently serves on the board of advisors, but the Feral Cat Spay Neuter Project has expanded services beyond spay neuter. Christine is concerned that those expanded services might lead to opposition from local practitioners, opposition that really has not occurred up until this point in time. She doesn't know what the next step for her will be, but she recognizes that the location of the stationary clinic makes it difficult for some individuals who really need their services to take advantage of their services. As in any discussion of history, the missing piece is always the future. But with Christine's skill, her heart, and her commitment, you can believe that spay-neuter will be an integral part of her future. Pockets of resistance to high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter still exist. In 2014, a veterinarian working in a high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter clinic was brought up on charges by her state licensing board. The formal complaint included charges that, and I quote, "No veterinarian can do that many surgeries a day and do them well. And no veterinarian can do surgeries that fast and meet standards. In spite of all the improvements and acceptance by much of the profession, we still have work to do." So what does the future hold? So much progress has been made since Dr. Mackie opened that first clinic in the 70s. The number of pioneers involved in high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter is too numerous to count, certainly too numerous to discuss here today. A few of the old guard have retired, but a new generation has stepped in to take a leadership role. There are still pockets of resistance, as I mentioned, in the profession, but that will probably always occur. But veterinarians now leave most schools with an understanding of the overpopulation issue, a better understanding of the issues animal shelters face, and with significantly better spay-neuter skills than just a few years ago. Shelter medicine is now a recognized specialty, and high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter has become mainstream. There are still debates in the profession about spay-neuter, especially about when to perform spay-neuter. And significantly more research has to be done before some of those debates are settled. But what cannot be debated, at least not legitimately debated, is that high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter saves lives. Spay-neuter reduces pet overpopulation and reduces euthanasia in shelters, and that high volume and high quality go hand in hand. Some of you in this room have brought the profession to where it is today, and with high quality, high volume spay-neuter. Others in the room will lead it into the future. But the future is bright. We have come so far, but we cannot rest. We will reach a day when no adoptable animal is euthanized simply because of lack of space in a local shelter, and high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter will remain the most effective means to reach that goal. I thank each one of you in this room for what you do. You are part of the movement. You are part of the solution to the problem. You make the world a better place. Thank you very much, and God bless.